Hey, Tembi, it's nice to see you.
Hi, Ira. It is so good to see you. Thank you for having me here to cook together.
Thanks for being part of this year's Institute for Human Caring conference.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. I love the Institute.
So we're here to talk about your book and your life, and it's a remarkable memoir about love and illness and grief and food. Before we do that, I thought we'd enjoy cooking together, and there are very few things that I know how to cook, but you have a wonderful recipe for pesto from scratch, and I cook pesto.
Okay.
So I thought we could,
Let's do it.
do it together.
I think it would be fantastic. And also, for those who do not cook a lot, it's super user-friendly.
That's
one of
why I
my
do it.
favorites. I mean, to talk a little bit about the book, my late husband was a chef, and so after his passing, a part of how I healed myself was to come to the kitchen, and I had to start with the simple things. And this is a very simple, nutrient-dense recipe.
And delicious. I mean, the thing about pesto is it's easy to make. There's not that many ingredients, and people love it. I miss the pine nuts, by the way.
Do you like almonds?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
I have an open mind.
Good, I'm glad. The almonds are great. And by the way, the almonds are a traditional nut to the island. So everything in this recipe is like literally what you would find at the height of the season, and it's great. So, and the other addition is the tomato. Mm-hmm. The hero of the dish. Mm-hmm. Because it sort of pops it. It adds a nice hue to it. It brings a little acidity to it, a sweetness if they're really right. Oh, it's so good. So that's what we're gonna do. And of course, garlic and olive oil and salt and pepper. I'm gonna say, let's begin with basil. So this is like a classic Italian basil. Everything is gonna go into a blender. You can get in there and very crudely just break it up. But I like to do a little bit of a cut. How are you about garlic? Do you like it?
I love garlic.
So many antioxidants, great immune booster, very crudely cut, because it's all gonna, look at you, Ira. Okay, I like this. We use industrial amounts of garlic. The steam, you could see garlic steam coming off of the pesto. This is fantastic.
There's no vampires in our home.
I love it, 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 I love it. This is fantastic.
All right, to the almonds.
To the almonds, okay. So we've got here blanched almonds. You can use roasted, you can use raw with the skin, or you can use them like this. It's your choice. Okay. You use what's at hand. So we are going to just sort of crudely cut these so they go in the blender and they blend really smooth. Because ultimately, it's about texture. Mm-hmm. So if you like things crunchier, you could just throw all these in and go, but you'd be literally biting down. You'd feel the almond. Mm-hmm. Because this, we were talking earlier about the difference between the other pesto. The pine nut is a gentle, soft little nut. So it blends really easily. This you want to give a little cut before you throw it in.
Makes sense.
So, again, we're just kind of like halving them, and they go everywhere. So cook with a partner, somebody who'll catch them, throw them back at you. You just want that little bit of the sweetness and that little acidity that's going to add to the dish. So really, again, one of these is probably enough for the dish. If you have the cherry tomatoes, then use a clusterful, But it's really to your taste. And if you like more tomato, add more tomato. If you don't, don't.
How great is this? I mean, which side of the grate would you like it?
Ira, I saw what you did there, and I like it. You know what? Again, we're blending it all, so you can. It's your choice.
And do you have a sequence that you want to blend?
I typically like to put the coarser, harder, denser items closest to the blade. So in this case, I would do almonds first. So here goes. So here's the trick. This is the key. This is the lubrication, if you will, of the whole dish. So you're gonna need to you're gonna pour some in just to get it going, right? So this is about a cup. And then as it's blending, you stream it in, and that's gonna give that nice, smooth texture. The less olive oil you use, the crunchier, the denser it'll be, the smoother it will be. So we put this on top. I think we're in good hands, Ira.
I like it.
That's feeling like a good pesto to me. Let's smell it. So we need to use all of our senses. Oh yeah.
Man.
Oh yeah. All right. So, shall we eat?
Yeah, let's eat some.
Okay, Ira, shall I serve us?
I think we should.
Okay, all right.
So, Tembi, this has been wonderful just cooking with you, but I do want to have a conversation. You know, From Scratch is such a beautiful, poignant memoir about love, illness. It's also about grieving. It's mostly about life in all its fullness. And I'm so aware from reading the book and knowing you that your life changed in so many ways due to your husband's sorrows, illness, your caregiving for him, your advocacy for him, and your loss. You'd not have chosen any of that, and it was extremely hard, but I also know and sense that it wasn't entirely without value. Are there life lessons that you learned from this painful experience or set of experiences that you'd want to impart to others, particularly your daughter Zoella?
Oh my gosh, Ira. Well, yes, yes. That's a big question. I have lots of ways into it. I'm going to give you this first of all to get started, and I'm going to give myself some as I think about this question because it's a big question. And first of all, thank you for your kind words about the book.
It's just wonderful. It's delicious.
You know, it's funny you say that because when I sat down, I think these will be for you. When I sat down, and we can add a little cheese if you'd like.
Okie dokie.
Yeah,
fingers.
me too. I'll do the same.
Oh, so beautiful. This is so beautiful.
Straightforward. When I began to write the book, one of the things that I knew I wanted to write a book about grief. But I knew the way for me to write about grief was that I had to come at it as an expression of, and if you will, the B side of my love, and as an expression of food. And I thought, how do I do that? But my late husband was a chef. And so in a lot of ways, the way when I first began to think about writing, so many memories would come to me. You know, and anyone who has lost someone who is very beloved to them, the waves of memories that come. And for me, those memories were always tethered to food. I mean, how we first met, you know, his time in the kitchen, time with our daughter. And so it really began as me writing those recipes down and just trying to not forget. The first act of grieving for me was trying to not forget. I wanted to hold on to everything. And eventually, I realized all that writing, that there was something more. And then I thought, well, but what's different about my story and why, you know, I think anyone who writes a memoir says, well, why would anybody want to read my book? Like, what do I actually have to offer? And I had a teacher who said that stories and memoir are like sitting around the campfire telling a story. And I felt that the things that I had learned as a caregiver and as a young widow and as the mom of a grieving child, that I had some value to offer, as well as the offerings of good food and travel to Sicily and whatnot. So I tried to put all of that into the book. But the thing that I would say about grief, and my grief in particular, was that I had to learn over and over again, to start where I was.
What do you mean?
What I mean by that is every day looked different, especially that first year of loss. So what worked for me 2 days ago might not work today. So I had to start again where I was, and that's constant. I felt that first year, and really for me the second year, was a lot of starting over. And interestingly enough, I'd had this similar experience as a caregiver, because over the trajectory of an illness, what worked year one didn't work in year 3. And I think that that was something that I didn't know that I would confront, this way of accepting exactly where we are right now and using the best that we have to go forward, even if that's just an inch. And that became a kind of operating principle, a guiding principle for me. And I had a lot of wise people who said that. Who said just take, and it comes in the form of take it easy, you know, don't put too much pressure on yourself. Those are the kinds of lessons that you hear people often say to grieving people. And we can certainly drill down deeper into it and talk more. But I can't wait to try this.
Man.
I know. Okay, here goes. Ira? Ira? We did the thing.
Is there enough garlic in there for you?
Oh yeah, I love it. It's good, isn't it?
My mouth is vibrating with garlic.
It's so
good.
nice.
And the basil.
The basil. And
the almonds.
And you notice how the tomato just kind of subtly disappears underneath it all? But it's there.
Yeah, I'd actually forgotten about the tomato. Yeah, but I see what you're saying. There's a balance.
There's a balance.
Did writing the book free you? I mean, you wrote all those memories. Your daughter will get to read it and know you and her dad, but also you together as a couple in ways that not every child does. So was that freeing?
Yes, and I you know, yeah, no,
Well,
you please go.
take
While
your
I
time and
think,
gather
while I
your
think,
thoughts.
yeah, you dive in. I think the thing that what I didn't know when I started to write the book, I don't think you can know how hard it is to write a book. I think if you did, you probably wouldn't do it, right? So I was just kind of like, I'll write all these memories down, and it will be a legacy. It will be a way of sort of documenting. But I was always aware that if any, you know, people have asked me, what reader did you have in mind? And to a large degree, I had my daughter as my reader in mind, because I felt as though she was 7 years old when her dad passed. And so I knew that she would have a lifetime of memories without him, but these formative years, some of which were, you know, pre-cognitive, like she just didn't have, you know, pre-verbal. Right. I wanted to sort of, for her, document that time in our lives, and also what it was like to mother through that. Because I feel that as she grows and develops in life, she's going to have her own set of losses, joys, obstacles, challenges. And it's not to say that my roadmap will be her roadmap, but just to know that someone else, someone she lived with, her own mother, has sort of had to rebuild and reimagine and try to hold dear, that those things have value, that no matter what she confronts in her life as she grows up, she'll know that there's a value in holding close and holding dear, maybe someone that she's loved and lost, but also holding herself dear. Because that's the other thing is when you asked, was it freeing? What it did, the writing of the book allowed me to see the trajectory of my life in a different way. I kind of thought like, oh yeah, all these things sort of happened to me. But when you sit and you really have to, as a writer, think about the totality of your life, what I saw was, oh, at 20 years old, oh, I was someone who would like lean into love. Oh, I did have caregiving in me. My grandmother was a caregiver, and I spent time, you know, every summer with her, and I watched her care for my grandfather. Oh, that didn't just happen out of nowhere. And so I began to sort of see how all of this was making the tapestry of who I was.
Wow.
And that was a gift. And in a way, that was freeing, because I could never sort of trick myself into believing like, yeah, it all just happened. No, there's some intentionality that goes into life. And it's a reminder to me that as I go forward, to bring that with me. Did that make any sense at all?
Absolutely.
As I dive in for more possible.
Absolutely.
So it was freeing in that sense, in that, and it was also freeing to not have to hold all the memories all by myself. If that because somehow the act of putting them on the page and knowing that I would share them meant that it wasn't just something that, you know, I held here or that I remembered it. Because when you lose someone, at least certainly a spouse, who I'd been with for half of my life, literally half of my life's memories went with him. Like I would go, oh, that thing, and I would want to turn to him to talk about it, and he's not there. So I'm like, oh, I try to find photographs. I try to find anything to sort of take myself back. And that's one of the things people don't talk so much about in grief, right? Is watching like half of your stories leave you. And this was a way of reclaiming them for me.
The scene that resonated with me so much was him standing outside your apartment in the rain. What a fierce suitor he was. Oh my heavens. And I read that and thought, oh God. I mean, wow. That's
I get emotional
amazing.
when you think about it. I mean, yes. Yes.
And I think Zoella will know him in a way that she might not otherwise from reading that.
Yes. And what's interesting is, but the memoir made me investigate that moment in a different way, because we'd always told that story, like as a couple at dinner parties, as like a fun, you know, oh my gosh, you know, the night she all overslept and, you know, I stood in the rain and da, da, da.
For a long time.
For a long time. And so, but now, you know, here I was in my mid-40s, right? He's passed away. I started writing the book 5 years on the 5th anniversary of his passing, because there was something about that 5-year mark that was, it was arresting for me. It was just arresting. I thought, oh, there's just going to be, like, there's 5, and oh, then there's going to be a decade. Oh, then there's, okay. And I knew I was as close to those memories. The more time that would march on, I might forget some. And so I started thinking about that specific episode. I thought, and I remember talking to him, you know, meaning from
as you were writing?
As I was writing, and saying, how the hell did you do that? Like, how did you know?
He was in love.
He was in love. and I said, not only was he in love, but then he taught me how to love. And then I realized, and it was only in the writing of the book, I said, oh, he taught me how to stand in the rain. He taught me that that's what love is. And that's what I did for him for 10 years as a caregiver. That was my turn to stand in the rain for him. And I wouldn't have known that in that way had I not written the book. The memory would have been, oh yeah, he stood in the rain for me. Like kind of, oh, it was lovely, it was nice, but no, there was a teaching in that moment that was seminal to who we would become as a couple, to who he was, and to what he was offering me.
Wow.
And once you know that kind of love,
Wow.
you can't unring that bell.
What did he say about that? Well, how did he explain that to you later?
In the rain, well, he was like, he was, you know, very, very underspoken, you know, soft-spoken, gentle. He's like, I was just hoping you'd come. He was like, I was just like, and then he was like, you know.
And he had worked all night, right?
He worked all night, and of course this is pre-cell phones, right?
Right.
And the buzzer on the building that I lived in didn't work, and so you couldn't like just buzz and say, you know, come down and get, you know. And we had this sort of agreement, you know, I was I should back up and say, I was in Italy. For those who haven't read the book, I was 20 years old at the time and a student studying art history in Florence, Italy. And we met on a street corner in Florence. And I will not give too much away, but once we began dating, we had this arrangement. I lived with other students in the house, and you couldn't just, you know, be bothering people at all hours of the night. But when he would get off work, I'd just stand outside, and I'd set my little alarm clock, and I'd, you know, let him in. And I overslept this one night. And, you know, I will share something with you that I can share because of both our friendship and the work you do. And I can share with you that that night in the writing, I was able to understand that the night he passed away, he also waited for me. And you know, in your work, that can happen with people who are in families, people who are in love. And so the night of his passing, when he was home, I was caring for him. I had family around, and then I needed a break. I needed to just rest my body, and I fell asleep. Not unlike the night 2 decades earlier. And my sister woke me, and she said, I think it's time. And we got to share a last moment together. And so, in a way, I've kind of like, you know, that's kind of like the heart of the book in the way. It's like these big moments of love and life and loss. There's a way, I think, that when we lean deeply into love, we would do anything for our beloved, including standing in the rain, not knowing when they're going to wake up and come down. And also, at the end of life, I mean, we hear stories often of the father who waited for the son to get off the plane, and he walks in the door and takes his last breath.
Well, there is a fierceness about love at that level.
You know this. You know, you've seen it many times. You know, I just know my one personal experience, but this is your work.
Yes, but it's conveyed so powerfully in your writing and in your story. Food is obviously nurturing. It's essential for healing, for our well-being. But I sense that food, well, and cooking particularly for you, has become something more. Is cooking a way for you to practice self-care? Is it kind of a centering exercise, somewhat like, you know, throwing pots is for a potter, or
sure.
meditation?
Sure.
Or is it something else?
It is both of those things. And it's also, and I would add a third. So yes, it is definitely self-care. Literally, as a newly widowed, grieving person, it was hard to eat. I mean, people know this, right? It is very hard to, and so the act of just getting to the kitchen, for me, was multi-layered, because that was his space. And so I didn't want to go in the kitchen at all. And so when I slowly began to go into that space, and I thought, well, what can I make for myself? My lovely husband cooked for me for all these years, and now I have to learn how to do these things. So it became an act of both feeling connected to him. That's the other thing. It's a way of connection. Food is a connector for me, and the cooking is a connector. And often I like to cook alone. I'll put on some favorite music that he used to play, or we'd play together. And it's my way of meditating, centering myself, calming myself down, right? It's a sacred space for me. Now, I know it's not that way for everyone, but as a chef's wife, that space is a very sacred space. A lot of memory and joy and love happened there. So I don't take it casually. Now, it's not to say that my kitchen sometimes isn't a hot mess, and right, with frozen food and whatnot, but for the most part, I do things like it took me a while before I realized, no, I can actually beautify this space. I have pictures of him. It's almost like another living room. I have pictures of him in the kitchen. I have artwork. I have something from my grandmother, who I loved very much. She had an old I guess it was from the 40s or 50s. They would have the match case right next to the stove, because you'd light the match to light the stove.
Yeah.
And for some reason, all of her possessions, that's the one thing I have, and I remember it from her kitchen, and I have it in my kitchen, so I feel connected to her. And I have a stove that will light without a match, and yet I like lighting it with a match. It's an act of remembrance. So it is definitely self-care. It is definitely a meditation, but it's also an act of remembrance.
And it feels like an act of love, too.
And love, yeah.
Well, this has been wonderful, boy, and I'm enjoying every bite.
Isn't it lovely?
Thank you again for doing this.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you for writing from scratch.
Thank you.
And for sharing your story with so many people, with all of us.
Thank you.
Now, From Scratch is being made into a Netflix series?
Ira, yes. Blessings upon blessings.
Are we just outing that, or is that okay to talk about?
It is okay to talk about it. I had the blessing of it being picked up by Reese's Book Club, which is for those readers out there, is a very big book club. And I was so incredibly humbled when I got that phone call.
This is Reese Witherspoon.
Reese Witherspoon, right? So I get this call that it wants to be a part of her book club, and I was like, bowl me over. I'm done. Like, no. And then she said, and we see this potentially as a series. And so, sure enough, there we are. And it is going to be on Netflix. It's 8 episodes. I think it's going to be out sometime in late 2022. And it's been a joy. And so we shot in Los Angeles. We shot in Italy, in Florence, in Sicily. The book takes place a lot in Sicily.
Wow.
And we actually were able to film in some of the same places that are identified in the book, places close to me and near and dear to me. So it's wonderful.
Because, the book is also just a wee bit of a travelogue.
Oh, it very much is a travelogue, because it kicks off with my 20-year-old self who's like, I'm going to Italy to study art. And I had no idea how it would change my life. I literally was like, well, I'm an art history major. I guess I'll go to, 20. But there was that sense of adventure and travel. And then, of course, the island of Sicily, which is really a character in the book.
Yeah, I
Which is why we're
agree.
having Sicilian wine and Sicilian pesto.
So wonderful, so bountiful. Well, I only have one
Yes.
last
Okay.
question
Okay.
for you. Have you found the secret of life? I mean, is it love or perhaps olive oil?
Can it be love and olive oil? Can it be both? Because I actually think in my world it's both. I actually do think it's both. It is most certainly love. I mean, love can soothe and heal a great deal. But if you pair that with some great olive oil, oh my gosh.
Well, another toast to
A toast.
to love,
To love
to life, and to olive oil.